Hello, ladies and gentlemen. We're at the end of May, and welcome to the MSP Initiative MSP Talk. Well, you got like the rest of this week. Close it up, close out the month. Summertime, at least for everybody on this side of the planet. Sorry for you guys down in, Australia and New Zealand. I know it's reversed, and the toilet flushes the other way and all that good stuff. But for us folks on this side, summertime, and you know what that means. A lot of road trips, a lot of flights. Like everybody's trying to go to Europe right now. You've been following social media, like cheap, 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 right? Get it in. Okay, sounds good. Let's get into the good. Let's get into the housekeeping, and then we'll get into the good stuff as usual. So MSPinitiative.com. If you know how to spell initiative, Google will fix it for you. When you get to this page, you will see sessions. This session, for example, this is being recorded. We're going to post it on our podcatchers and our YouTube page and the sessions tab here under MSPinitiative.com. However you choose to consume, like, share, subscribe, forward. Got some good stuff that we bring you twice a week. So please keep dialed in. Then at MSPinitiative.com, you have another tab called Community Minds. We did MSP Community Minds last year, and again this year was in Nashville. A completely educational event with MSP panels and workshops. What does that mean? We used to have this posted. We'll post the new ones. But effectively, MSP panels, we have MSPs from the trenches where you're probably coming from, getting in and talking about real life world experiences. I don't care how you learn. In my opinion, that is the best possible way. Because then it's real, right? It's not conceptual, like actually happened to someone. You learn from other people. That is, can't stress enough that I, advocate for that. 2, the workshops are designed to give you not just hey, let's talk about a topic, and let me give you the reasons why you should care about the topic. And by the way, we're going to cut it short unless you go to, www. and subscribe and buy, right? No. We're going to give you at least a 2-hour workshop, and we're going to actually show you how to get through the topic and how to actually functionally get to a working part at the end of that. So whether it's, prospecting, legal, security, and there are a bunch of other topics. I mean, it goes all over the place. That is the format of this. So yes, we have vendors co-sponsoring this. You can see there's a few already listed here. None of them are pitching you anything in a session. They're just, it's a community vibe. That's what we're trying to do. And by the way, other than getting to this next one here in Denver between September 25th, 26th, we're not actually charging you as an MSP to come. Think about that. There's no $9.99 conference registration fee. No, please come and learn. This is for you. I don't know what better offer I can make, but I'd say that's a pretty good one. Then we have our community block parties, and this is probably what we're better well known for. Multiple between now and the end of the year, but the 2 that are coming literally next, 2 weeks from now, we have the PAX 8 Beyond Denver block party. That'll be on June 10th. So if you're going to PAX 8 Beyond, I hope you are. It's going to be a pretty cool event. PAX8Beyond.com if you don't know what it is. On the night of the 10th, we're holding a block party. Absolutely free if you're an MSP to come and join us. Check it out. Click on this button. Register. That way you don't have to do it standing at the door. Or this other event that's happening literally a couple days later in the same week, right? So on the 12th, if you're going to Dublin for DattoCon or Kaseya DattoCon Dublin, we're doing a block party there as well. We did this last year. It was awesome. We're doing it again this year. Come out, join us. Again, doesn't cost you a dime. You're drinking on, some, nice food and beverages and networking with the crowd. I mean, isn't that what you want from every conference? I think so. So check those out. Make sure to click on these. It takes you to landing pages. You'll see details, and make sure you register ahead of time. It'll save you a bunch of time. Lastly, there's some community offers. These are just deals from some of the companies around the sandbox that you may or may not want to take advantage of. Awesome if you can. And then lastly is the industry calendar, where we're trying to keep track of, all the hundreds of events that are happening, every day, every week, every month for you, so that you can figure out what's going on. That is all at MSPinitiative.com. That is the housekeeping. Back into the closet. And here we go. So first time ever that we've had our guest who's going to be on the show today come on, or anyone from his company. So we're going to be learning a lot today. So Zach, go ahead, intro yourself and your company.
Well, George, absolutely killer housekeeping. You rolled right into that. I mean, we didn't even really say hi before the show. You just zoom. Awesome. Well done. So I'm Zach, co-founder to Senteon, managed endpoint hardening. Meh is what we're trying to get out there into the acronym world. A beautiful one, right? But I want to shout out a little bit of your housekeeping, right? So I was introduced to you guys, I remembered while you were giving the presentation, by probably our mutual friend CJ from CompTIA. So yeah, some head nods.
TJ's the best. He was actually Chris Johnson was actually on a few weeks back on this very show. He also, works very closely with Matt Lee over at PAX 8, and he did do 2 workshops at MSP Community Minds in Nashville. One of them he brought donuts, so that was always a hit. But man, he is a really smart guy. And by the way, every time I'm going to ask you this question too in a second. Every time somebody comes on here, I always say like, "Hey, how did you even like get here, right? What was your path? What was your journey?" Every time I learn all the different angles people make it into what I call the MSP sandbox, right? It's like we're sub industry of the greater technology kind of bubble. And like nobody hears from Facebook and Google and all those other cool companies, but like we still do a pretty important, work downstairs at our level. So number one, we'll definitely send CJ a message. Thanks for connecting the dots, buddy. But number two, yeah, let's hear your journey, man. Let's hear how you like went from wherever you started from to this founder of a company. And by the way, I haven't heard your story yet, but that's hard. I know everybody out here who listens, right? Maybe started MSP, IT company, marketing company, whatever. It's always harder once you're in the chair, right? Because all the stuff that you never realize is like has to happen is now your job. And like the 800 hats we all hear about every single day in small business, that's real.
I'm sorry, company handbooks have different laws per state, and yeah, I've learned a little bit more than I care to admit at this point about running a company.
It is, and as much as in MSP land, you're like, hey, outsource your technology to us, we'll take care of it. Like, you need to realize what you can and cannot do, and the quicker you come to that determination and you find a place to send that traffic to, the better off you're going to be. Because I agree, company handbooks, that's not my jam. You do not want me even trying to write a company handbook at all.
No, none of it's interesting. And funny bringing up Matt Lee in the workshops. I imagine, were they talking about the CIS working group, how controls feed into other controls? Is that by chance what it was?
A little bit. I know if Matt didn't make it, he's going to make the next one, I believe. But he's heavy into like the CIS control mapping. He has a whole project. I think he just posted online on his website, Cyber Matt Lee. But CJ touched on that, and then he kind of like took a more practical approach to, hey, how do you select the stack to align to what you're trying to accomplish? Like the whole best, I don't want to steal his message because he did it much better than I'll ever do. So go back and rewind on that session tab, mspinitiative.com. But he's like, hey, listen, the whole best in class thing, I know it's a little cliche. It's fine. Just follow me for a second. Like, that may not be what you're delivering. And it may not be what you need right now. Like, good is also acceptable, right? And like, as your MSP IT services organization matures, you're going to switch some of these things, right? You're going to change like the vendors in each category and the solutions in each category are going to change. But like, I guess you need to work backwards from your clientele, right? And like, that's going to really dictate what you're going to have to do with them or for them. Mm-hmm. And so that's going to kind of change your direction, I think.
Yeah, I mean so I was part of that working group. That's why I asked. I didn't know if that was what the presentation was on, but that was absolutely wild. So a little bit more background on Senteon, and I'll get to the origin story here in a minute, but we very much built our company 100% on CIS standards, right? That was the challenge we saw. MSPs today, not really today, I should say a few years ago, didn't really have a security framework. They didn't choose one to align with, or they chose aspects of many. There wasn't really this just one golden answer. And I'm not here to say CIS is the only golden answer. I'm here to advocate that it should be, and every MSP should follow it. But that's where we built our company. So when Matt put that working group together, I messaged him right away and wanted to get involved because, like you said, and you hinted at this, having to work almost backwards with your client to know what they need, where they need to align. But you also said vendors. Where does a vendor fit into these CIS controls? And I can define CIS controls if you want me to go into that. But like, where do they fit? How do you keep up with vendor innovation? This new feature that this vendor releases maps back to this. Now I can get rid of this tool. Now I can add this tool. How, I mean, y'all MSPs, you have a lot to do across many clients, and I imagine it's fun. It's never the same day twice, but it's a lot of work. And hopefully some of us vendors better align and make it a little bit easier for you.
I mean, I would argue that it's pretty poorly done. Meaning, yeah, a bunch of people buy stuff, they put stuff in, and then they stop paying attention. Things change until there's a break. That's when they're paying attention again, because like, I know there's companies that popped up. They're like, oh, we're going to track all your vendor alerts in one place. I don't even think that's working. The MSP is like just a little bit too in the business, not on the business is probably the best way for me to kind of outline it. Like, to really, until you get to a certain size. Once you get to a certain size, it's a little bit different story, because you have more resources and you can actually pay attention and do something about it, right?
Yeah, I
And
mean,
usually around that size, like, they also have a better process of evaluating vendors and
yeah,
testing and the criteria and all that jazz. But yeah, to your point, I think a lot of MSPs out there, and I've said it a million times, here's a million one. Credit card swiping fatigue, right? They'll go to a show. I think you said you're at MSP Geek last week.
yep.
They'll say, hey, that looks really cool. 6 months later, they didn't even start. They didn't dust that off and try and put it in place yet. And so I think a lot of that's out.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And I mean, it's also hard to kind of peel through all the marketing noise. So really just admiration for what Matt Lee's trying to do with mapping vendors to CIS, and hopefully that shift happens. And you just said, it's easy for an MSP to be so close to the business, right? It's until you mature enough and have the resources to really branch out. I mean, even as a vendor, right? MSPs, vendor owners, like, we're also owners just like you. It wasn't until yeah, I mean, it very much is so easy to get close to the business. I think either last week, I talked to Joe Alapad at Lion Guard, and I haven't given him enough praise. I've posted him about a few times, but he helped me take a step back and realize the messaging of what Senteon does. Because at this point, I was brought on for go-to-market, sales, marketing, whatever that is, right? And I became so close to the tech, I lost my rudimentary sales pitch. I immediately just go straight to the technical now, and that's what happens, right? You're a small team. You have to know every aspect. Just when you're an MSP owner with a small team, you're not just an owner. You're the engineer. You're help desk sometimes. You're definitely sales. And that's the line between early vendors and MSPs, right? As much as vendors will probably tell you they get it, only the ones who are at this stage truly get it, because we are stretched just as thin as you.
It's funny. I was going through the Instagram feed over the weekend, and one of them, I'm not even a huge Mark Cuban fan, other than he's on Shark Tank and everybody knows about Shark Tank.
It's a good show.
Um, it was like a small clip, and he's like, I don't care what size business you are, I don't care if you're just starting out, I don't care if you're mega corporation, like, sales solves a lot of things, right? And I guess let me revert that to another industry. In any sports league, winning solves a lot of things, right? Anybody who tells you, oh, let's build something and like we'll figure out sales later. No. Flip that around. You need to figure out how to sell, how this is going to sell. And like, we'll work on this as well. But like, that is just as important. So I agree with that. I don't know if I agree with everything Mark Cuban puts out there, but that was absolutely on point.
I think we feel the same about good old Mark,
Yeah.
from your insinuations.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. He's a quirky guy. I mean, he's successful. There's no question about it. And
yep.
I mean, it was funny. I took my very young children out for Mother's Day shopping, and we ended up, because it was a smiley face, they picked the Scrub Daddy as one of the things they threw in the cart. And I was like, oh, I remember this Shark Tank.
Yeah, very, very much. And this aspect of winning in sales first, like that's honestly advice that I think is so hard for an entrepreneur who doesn't have a product yet to hear. Like that just doesn't make sense. How am I going to sell something if I don't have something to sell yet, right? And that was one of the challenges that we really had over at Senteon because when I tell you more about what we do, right, changing configurations and hardening and baselining assets, like that, all of those buzzwords or words that I said aren't really talked about. They're not things that are highly prioritized, at least the MSP level. You know, I don't really work with enterprise, but even at the enterprise level, I've heard from my either MSP partners or VARs that they have the same challenges. So, as this company who is building something and wasn't selling before there was a product, I'm realizing I had the opportunity a lifetime to just full on hone in on my pitch, create marketing material, create lead demand gen, and I didn't do any of that. I'm just now starting to do that now that we actually have, for the last year or so, like revenue generating proper mature platform at this point. But now I'm trying to do actual sales and demand gen when realistically that engine should have been built before the product.
And by the way, this topic, now we're kind of talking on vendor side of the train tracks here, but MSP, right? Same challenge, same issue. I mean, how many times for the last, I don't know, 20 years have we been saying sales and marketing are like top three still in issues that MSPs are digging into? Here's the reality, right? I'm not quite saying fake it till you make it because there's a fine line there too. Don't misrepresent what you can do. But I'm sure Brad Gross is somewhere out in the ether listening. Like you do need to, like, technology is such a wide landscape, right? It's a big word. And like when I was going back to school, they're like, oh, there's 8 disciplines of technology that are tracks that get you to a diploma. And I'm like, 8? I'm sure there's way more now, right? In 2024. That being said, as an MSP, like what are you doing? Everything for everybody is not the answer because that's not scalable, right? So you need to hone in on what you do or you plan to offer and then like fine tune your messaging. That being said, the better you define it and actually shrink it, right? I think sometimes you like, oh, I want to do, oh, I heard so and so's doing that. I want to do that. And it's like, dude, outsource it then. Like maybe that's not something you do internally, but I digress. That being said, fine tune your message. Can't stress that enough, which is why I know I'm going a little bit off track here, but I'm going to finish with this thought. Outsourcing the message creation for you to a third party usually doesn't work. I'm not saying there's not a lot of good sales, marketing, PR people out there. There are. But if you can't tell your message, why are you expecting somebody else to create it for you? Like you need to define what your message is. And if they can fine tune it, that's where they should come in. Shouldn't be the opposite way around. So if you don't control your story, somebody else is going to control for you. And I promise you, if somebody else control your story, you're going to be very unhappy with the results. And then you're going to be another person that comes and says, I dropped tens of thousands of dollars, whatever, year later, 15, 18, 24 months later. And you're like, I spent 60, 80, $100,000 and like nothing came from it. And it's like, who created your story? Oh, they said they were going to do it all for me. I was like, but what if that's just a template for everybody? That I think is not good. Anyway, back to Zach's story. Go for it.
Well, template for everybody is actually exactly what we're against. So funny saying you mentioned that, and hang on 1 second. Sorry, phone was ringing on the soft phone, ringing in my ear. So fix that. Template, not the template for everyone. So that's actually exactly what we as a company said is the issue with configuring and baselining and hardening is everyone just wants, oh, here's a template. I'm going to roll it out over group policy. Here's the CIS template. Yeah, they need CIS. Roll it out. The issues with templates, you said it, I'll say it again. They're not for everyone. Everyone has their own exceptions. Everyone has their own unique needs. And there needed to be an innovation to this, which is exactly what we developed to say, hey, here's 100% of best practice standards. In a perfect world, yes, apply all. Reality is this middle ground. You need tier 3 engineers, extremely seasoned people who understand individual settings on whether an OS or a browser or whatever application, to know all of these settings and then determine which ones within the template you can or can't handle. Well, what MSP has an engineer who only wants to look at configurations and learn thousands of settings inside and out? I can't imagine there's a single MSP out there with an engineer who wants to do that. So what our whole innovation is the fact that we have a learning mode to say, hey, these are the settings that you should put, but here's the ones that won't break anything. Here's the ones that probably will break something. And now your engineers have a much smaller in scope list of the settings to review, either to leave it the way it is to maintain operational, or change it anyway, but at least now you know the setting that might break something.
So let me rewind.
We're eliminating templates.
30,000 foot overview. What are you solving for? You're saying hardening, right? So
Yep.
like, to me, that's, I said it earlier, I'm gonna say it again. That's usually a problem you tackle after you've had a problem.
Sure.
Right? There's an incident, there's an issue, there is a vulnerability that was, the door for somebody to walk in, create a problem. Like every time everybody's ever, wired money because they got an email, saying, oh, we've changed your account, and then realized that somebody stole that. That's when they're like, oh, well, that wasn't good. How do we prevent this from happening again? So that's what I'm thinking in my head, right?
Mm-hmm.
Hardening. So we can flip this around: proactive versus reactive, long tail. That's been told for many years. So your position is, hey, you probably don't have you're probably not doing a great job of hardening endpoints, right? So we're not talking about the 1,800 security products you can put on a computer to catch something. You're talking about,
should also configure those, but that is not the scope I'm talking about here.
Okay, all right. Just wanted to define this so it makes perfect sense.
That is still hardening, though. Those applications and setting those settings, that is very much still hardening.
So that's part of it.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a bigger picture of, here are the known areas that if you're just leaving your front door open, your window open, somebody just walks through, well, like, you didn't stop them, right? You didn't make it any harder for them to just walk right in and do whatever they're going to do, right? So like, put the alarm system in first, kind of thing, before somebody tries to steal your stuff from your house, right? So like, what are the, other than CIS, which I think people are aware that CIS is a thing, but maybe haven't really investigated much time into it. What are the main areas of this hardening that you're solving for?
So specifically what we're doing is the hardening of the OS, so the operating system, and then the browser. So this could be the workstation OS, the server OS, or mobile devices OS, right? And it's funny, the age-old tale of reactive versus proactive. I actually stay away from that battle, because these settings, when we talk about hardening, let me put it this way. So everyone knows about vulnerability management. Everyone knows about patch management. Hardening is kind of this middle ground. Hardening management. It doesn't even sound good, but it sits in this middle ground, because these settings that I'm talking about with you today is settings that are available on every single workstation, every single browser. They're there, and they're not secure by default. Why are they not secure by default? Windows said so. They prioritize usability. Maybe there could be some arguments, but even the Chrome browser, right? There's a lot of settings that you could change to increase security that are not in place by default, because it's an extra layer of friction between adoption, right? So vulnerabilities can be new, come 0 day, whatever that is. Patches come as software advantages. Hardening are settings that are there that you can do, that we just choose not to. So why I was saying we kind of stay away from the proactive reactive argument. Yes, you're proactively changing settings, but these are all preventative security measures. So I think even further left, you're not proactively reacting to something. All of these exist. All of these are there today on all of the listeners' devices, on my device, right? All of these settings exist. You have to take the proactive step to become preventative. Why have this fancy EDR? Why have this fancy ring fence? All these extremely incredible and fancy solutions built on top of something that isn't configured. That's the piece that confuses me the most.
Well, number one, to your point, even enterprises do a really bad job at this. That everybody just buys more and more products. That's true.
Yes.
To the point where these products overlap, and then we get into the whole problem of, well, administering these products on a regular is starting to become cumbersome. I digress. Even companies have popped up. We've had some on this very show who are like, hey, we have all 14 things right in one platform. You don't even have to buy separate products from separate vendors. I'm like, wow, okay.
I don't know if I agree with that single point of failure methodology, but all right.
Hey, like, I digress. That being said, yeah, the same apply. Like, let me just use an example because I know it just happened. I saw last week Microsoft is finally going to enforce MFA to log into Azure Control Panel.
Sure.
And I'm like, dude, it's 2024. We've been talking about MFA for at least 5 years. And I think Microsoft hasn't been really enforcing MFA on standard Office 365 accounts until like the last year ago, right?
I think it was a year. Yeah, it wasn't that long ago.
So like, that's an example of like, hey, the default is off, right? Like they're like, hey, you have to configure this to fit your customer, your environment. And like 400 checkboxes later, it could be 1,000 different permutations. That being said, give me an example of how the MSP, you said there's like, how does this get deployed, right? So you said there's listener mode. That's really cool because, you know, I can't tell you how many times people are like, well, I didn't know that, or they didn't tell me that, or we didn't spend enough time investigating their environment. Every time. I've heard that every single time. But that being said, like, people looking at your solution would say, how does this look end to end? I have a prospect that I want to try this on to, they're running, they're functioning, I'm managing it. Walk us through that journey.
Sure. So talking about Senteon specific, not the traditional way of manually doing this. Yeah. Okay. So you have a new prospect, you're looking at it. Typically today you might show them, you know, whether it's a scan, which vulnerability scans extremely valuable, show the broader picture, right? With hardening, you can do the same type of thing. You may already have a scanning tool within your stack that gives you a scan of the configurations.
Sure.
Where Senteon takes it a little bit further, and as a note, this is kind of our gift to the MSP space. Any podcast I go on to, your viewers are welcome to get free assessments, internal and external. So there's the little plug for you guys, completely free. Deploy the reports, get your assessments. So for perspective on Senteon, so the first piece is to actually run this assessment. This will show you all the existing configurations versus security best practices, whether these are from CIS, NIST, or Microsoft standards, whatever that is. And this will basically present to you something interesting that a lot of scanning tools don't show you. So because we're not leveraging group policy, we're not leveraging Intune, we're looking directly at the reg keys, sec pool, audit pool. We're looking at where these individual settings live. Sometimes our results may differ from the traditional scanning tools. That's because we're looking at the source of truth as opposed to just trusting Microsoft. I mean, I would ask the audience, and George, I don't know your background if you've been an engineer, but you ever change an Intune policy or deploy a PowerShell script and just trust without doubt it was successful?
I can tell you a lot of people do. I mean, at the end of the day, here's what maybe it was successful on 9 out of 10. And you didn't realize number 10 was a problem until it was too late, right?
That's right.
It happens all the time. And quite frankly, I think that most RMMs, like, if you're not coding for the check, then
Yes.
you just say the script ran successfully. Cool. But like,
move on.
you don't know that it actually, like, the fact that the script ran was great, but did it complete and did it return a okay? It did get completed on this machine, like that. You have to actually go a step further to get there.
And take it even further than that step. What about 10 minutes later? Did it stay to that change state or did it change? Right. So anyway, what I'm getting at here is our reports look at the source of truth, which might differ from a group policy report because we're looking at this source. What the most interesting thing we found is when we onboard partners who maybe have a completely Intune environment, Intune joined environment. I go, hey, give me 10 endpoints, deploy Senteon on 10 machines. And believe it or not, we find differences. So part of this free offering that we have is basically a sales presentation. So yes, you get your grade, you get your configuration score against CIS or regulatory frameworks, PCI, whatever you want, right? You get that score. But the second panel of this sales report shows you how many different combinations of settings there are across your entire client. So if it's 100% Intune joined, it should only be only one configuration set. But if you want to put it to the test, give me 10 machines, I would be inclined to believe there's at least 3 different combinations. And I'd be even further to believe your engineer doesn't know why each machine is different. That's just what we've seen.
Yeah, I wouldn't even make that bet. I'm going to say it's going to be absolutely going to happen. Like,
Yep.
On a different context, the comment is made. One, put all your eggs in the Microsoft basket. What happens when Microsoft doesn't do what it's supposed to do? That happens. That's happened. Don't want to get too
Many
far.
vendors, including myself, have companies because of that.
And number two, how many times have you heard, well, Microsoft keeps us all in business. So that is a fact. Okay. MSP vendor, like whatever. That being said, I probably believe what you're saying, right? A combination of things. The software, the role of the person using the computer, the manufacturer, when it was purchased, like all of these things differ on many things, right? Why these settings would be slightly different. And you would think with Intune, which is like based in group policy, right? And its history, you would think there'd be like standards enforcement, right? And like that's how it's designed to work. But
yeah,
like,
so the interesting thing about group policy, and we actually, when we were building our tool, we kind of learned this just from getting this deep into the internals, is that group policy and Intune can only push.
yeah,
There's no verification, there's no pull. So when Senteon's making these changes, we actually have to notify, like, hey guys, we did some things down here. You guys want to know about it?
change management, yeah.
Yeah, so we had to build that additional piece. But yeah, talking about like MSP to prospect and how Senteon fits. So it's that sales report first. It's educating not only the end client, but the MSP that their existing configurations are not standardized. So that's the first piece of value add. Again, completely free. We map that then back to the MITRE attack chain, and we show a very beautiful heat map on which MITRE attack piece of that chain you're most vulnerable to, depending on your configuration state. So all of that, you can show the client, educate them a little bit more, and start to bridge that higher elevated conversation. Because I hear MSPs all the time. My client doesn't want to understand this. They don't care about this, right? I push back a little bit. There's definitely those clients out there, but if you show them a report that's truly unique of their environment, I've heard feedback from my partners that they actually care and they want to understand a little bit more. Maybe that's a one-off. Maybe my user base is working with a subset of people, but I do believe with the right report, they'll start to care more.
I mean, bottom line is things are always changing in technology land. Actually, that's part of the reason why I kind of think it's fun, but I digress. If I have a known set of things and I'm testing your environment against, and it's like, hey, look, here are all the things that need help. Again, if I don't know, I can't do anything about it, right? It's the knowledge part that's the first part. So that's cool. By the way, where do people go and get this free analysis testing tool?
Well, I will need, so on our website, senteon.co, I believe it's /contact, there will be a form and there's a message box. If you just toss in MSP Initiative, I'll be happy to include that as you guys. So anything where I come and talk, I'm always happy to give some type of free perk like that. So
awesome. Well,
very much.
Keep a note. We're at 137. That's what'll go out with this message, that offer. So, all right. So you run this analysis. Your report comes back with the heat map. You're like, all right, guys, we're green, 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 yellow, 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 red, red, red. Right? I mean, we got problems. We need to fix this. Now what?
So now this step 2. So you effectively, at this point, you've ran the learning mode, you've gained your assessment. Now you need to set your goals. So we've worked with tens of thousands of machines, and we've ultimately identified for you out of these thousands of settings, a select subset that, one, we can't gather enough telemetry on, but two, they are known to be end client noticeable. So this is an example like a message logon text, warning, private device, XYZ, right? You have to click OK on that message, or Control Alt Delete, right? So we've broken up a small section to say, hey, these are company decisions. You need to tell us what you want and what you can handle. So you set your goals. That's step 3. Once you set your goals, and we already have the telemetry, you set your goals. Now you say, Senteon, take all that telemetry and compare it to this. This is your golden image. And now in finalization, you can actually see before changing any setting, what Senteon thinks will break. And that's the meat of our solution. We show you what we think will break something before changing it. And you can go through that entire piece as an engineer to learn about risk you've been accepting without necessarily realizing it. Some very interesting ones is when certain applications, we'll call it video editing software, will create its own user rights assignment to lock pages in memory, right? So that can DOS your device. There's certain findings like SMB1 where people don't even know that's still there. And we'll say, hey, this was used last week, right? There's I mean, user rights assignments are probably the funniest findings. I say funny, that's a rude way to put it, but apps and updates just put things in places without notifying you. And that's not funny. It's just unfortunate that there's no easy way to find it until we built this thing. So that's where you get to review everything, and you can either make the decision to say, you know, I as a company, I don't know why this is here, but I can't figure out if I can change it or not because I don't want to cause disruption. So you say, Senteon, for now, leave it the way you found it, and then you can actually document why you accepted that risk. So then it generates in your follow-up reports. Alternatively, Senteon will say, hey, this is risky because of this finding to change to your operational workflow. You can say, well, I now know which device this is risky on. Again, this may only be one out of those 10 machines because this one machine had something unique, the rest didn't. And then they call that individual, right? Hey, do you need a Linux subsystem on your endpoint, on your Windows workstation, right? Do you use this? And if they say no, then you can disable it straight from our software, right? So now you get more contextual awareness behind GPOs, behind group policy, well, all the same thing. Anyway, you get more contextual awareness as to why Senteon thinks something is safe versus not safe, and the engineer can make the decision based on those findings. So that's really the big meat of the solution.
Okay. So we run the assessment, get the answers, then we figure out what the organizational answers are. It comes out with the matching, right? This is what you had before, this is what it should look after. Oh, and by the way, nobody has enough time to do any damn testing because Patch Tuesday is on automatic anyway. So let's just understand what's going to actually break. By the way, awesome. Make somebody look absolutely, like rock star rather than the guy who broke something. Happens all the time. So that happens in the beginning.
Yep.
What happens after that? Is there any continuous thing that keeps going?
So perfect question. So after you finish all that, you document your risk, you change settings, there's a single button that says activate. Activate will actually remediate thousands of settings, right? That's the thing, right? We're not necessarily a scanning tool. Of course we scan, but that's a feature. What we do is we take your scanning reports, whether that's, Nexus, Tenable, Qualys, all of those, without integration, we make those green, right? If you actually want to fix your vulnerability scans with automation, that's what we do. So what's after activation? So this is interesting because we built a lot more of these features a little bit sooner than we thought we would have needed to. So applying settings is awesome. Unfortunately, there's a lot of compliance and reporting that MSPs want after the fix. So that's what we prioritized earlier than we anticipated. So the biggest thing is remediation feedback. So there are times where Senteon will say, hey, this setting failed to apply. Imagine if group policy told you that, right? And I will guarantee you, group policy will also fail to apply. They just won't tell you. So we'll actually tell you when a setting on which device was not successful. Further than that, if it's unsuccessful, it will try again about, I think, 3 to 5 times. But at some point, it will say, hey, it failed. And if applicable, it'll say it failed because of this application. It failed because of the domain level. It failed because of XYZ, right? So now your engineers know which settings are not applying, and they know what's not allowing Senteon to do its job. So that's probably the coolest piece of it. On top of that, the compliance aspect. So we do take every single configuration, we leverage CIS, and then we crosswalk it to regulatory frameworks. So I said PCI, like HIPAA, FFIEC, right? So we have tailored reporting just against regulations. And regulations like CMMC and FFIEC have auditors that say, be able to show the change history to your baseline, right? Verbatim. That's what they say. Today, without Senteon, I don't know how you're doing this. I've heard multiple point in time vulnerability scans is change tracking. But
Yes.
what happens in between each monthly scan? Is that really change tracking?
Point in time comparison, I guess. But
Right,
yeah.
point in time comparison. So in our view as a company is that's not change tracking. That's not exactly what change tracking is. So our solution on top of after activation will show you who's making changes, what's making changes, what's the timestamp, it changed out of compliance, how long until Senteon put it back, right? So this entire change log is automatically saved and done. So then when you have your audit, single click, Excel export, boom, or you can do PDF or whatever you want, right? All I'm talking, everything I've said is all exportable to Excel. That's probably one of the most underappreciated features that we have. Every single table can be exported.
I mean, listen, that is awesome because why, like, again, age old MSP IT services industry problem. It's like, hey, why did it break? I don't know. I can just fix it. Right? I mean, that's common. It's common in sentence, right? Like,
Yep.
you know who made the change? No, but we know how to go back and fix it now, or I can help you get back to running. Okay.
I actually just gave a presentation at MSP GeekCon last week, and my very first slide is I found it funny, but I said, guys, I don't want to give the rest of my presentation if we all can't agree on this one line. And then I had a slide and said, operational does not mean secure.
No, yeah, 100%.
So no one disagreed, but in reality, the majority of MSPs are living that way because this aspect we're talking about, changing settings and configuring assets, I've onboarded tens of thousands of machines and I have found one MSP that had more than 50% of the settings aligned to CIS. So that was about like 220 settings out of the 500 they recommend. Only one. No one's proven me in the MSP space or enterprise space in my limited expertise, but primarily MSP has had more than half of this done.
No, I believe you. I mean, at the end of the day, here's what it comes down to. Nobody's forced them to.
Yep.
Again, the end customer vertical is going to dictate a lot of things. If they're generalists, right, then unless their hand is forced, why? Well, because it's more secure. No, but we haven't had a problem until now, until we have a problem, right? But like at the end of the day, the next step is they don't have the knowledge internal to their company to actually get to the end.
Yes. Yes. That's
part
the
of
gap. Yes.
Hold on. There's another part to it. They don't have the time to get to the end of that project, right? So they're too busy on the day-to-day help desk ticketing and projects, right? And like, by the way, let's say they didn't have your tool and they wanted to go evaluate a customer's environment. How long is that going to take them?
Our case studies have shown quickest 8 months, but I've heard time periods up to 15 months to do what we do
But
in
who has
minutes.
8 months?
No one.
No. So like, that's why. That's the main two reasons on the answer of why. Do they need it? It would definitely show that they were way more prepared and doing and this comes back to Mr. Gross over here. It's like, hey, the marketing of what your services are and the delivery of it, especially if somebody else wrote the marketing message for you, don't align, right? So now they come back and they're like, but your marketing said this and 24/7 and proactive and this, that, and the other. And all of a sudden it's like, but none of this was done. Yep. So like very easy for maybe not the smartest attorney in the world to show up and say, I don't think these guys knew what they were doing.
I mean, we can talk about cyber insurance, which I don't want to go down that rabbit hole, but there is a checkbox today that says, do you have a hardened baseline? I believe I've had partners send me that. They don't ask for proof. They don't ask you to attest to it, but they say check mark this box, yes or no.
That's now, way too big.
Yeah, now a breach happens and they go, hey, you check mark this box. Can you show me your baselines? I would argue to say 99% of MSPs will have, if a Windows default baseline is 15%, which it is, I would argue that no MSP, majority of MSPs will be less than 20%. Because there's so many, right? There's so many. So this goes back to your challenges of time and resources. MSPs can only do the top 10 most important configuration changes. Top 10 determined by who? I don't know the answer to that. Internal knowledge, right? SMB1 needs to be disabled. Machine and activity timeout needs to be in place. So they'll do those 10 or the top 20 most important, but there's 450 settings on a workstation, 400 on a server, and another 120-ish on a browser. Who
Wow.
has time for all that?
Nobody. Back to so let me ask you this. When you guys decided to get into business, when you went and evaluated the market space to figure out why this was the current condition and state of affairs, like there's a lot of tools out there that kind of
A ton of tools.
like touch the border of what you're talking about, right?
Yes.
But like, why has this not been a focal point then? Like, why did it stop where it is, and like now your company exists and effectively in a gap?
Yeah, no, I mean it's 100% a gap. So it's funny. I was actually solely responsible for market research at Senteon, and this started was at the beginning of COVID, and it was like before a lot of these like huge online communities and networking things really started taking off. Like MSP Geek is huge now. It was still big then, but it wasn't what it was today. And I was able to talk to some of like the key people who gave me input was Matt Lee, for example, Chris Lair, Wes Spencer, like all of these people who are very much day to day in it. And they were like, oh, this is the best thing ever. This is what MSPs need. Yes, yes, yes. But it was very hard for me getting market research with more traditional MSPs. And being naive and not familiar with the MSP space, I didn't know these guys were mature. I just thought every MSP was like them.
No.
Not that Wes is an MSP, he's a vendor, but you get what I'm saying with that aspect. Dustin Bolander was another great friend to help me out. But all of these people who I thought was just the norm, and they're like, yes, 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 what you do, we need, turned out not to be the norm. So what did I really find in the market research? I talked to a very high subset of maturity of MSPs who told me this was needed. And what I learned after actually building the thing they told me to build is reporting, creating better sales presentations, and proving and the change track and everything else is more what the generalist MSP was looking for. So it wasn't until we added the more compliance focused features that we didn't really hit our, I guess, hockey stick, as people say, right? So
because it made it easier for them to position it. That's what it
it
is.
made it easier to position it. And why are all these
They
other
couldn't explain it going into their customer, so they're like, well, if I can't sell it easy, then I'm gonna go concentrate on something else. And then
Yes.
you came back and basically said, here you go.
Yep.
Take this into your customer. Now have come back and see me. And they were like, oh my God, this is great.
Yep. And one thing you're talking about, vendors like coming close to this but not really doing it. I do believe it's the same thing, the same story of Windows, right? Vendors don't want to be disruptive. And a lot of times these settings will make changes, right? If you don't base your entire company motto and just mission around not disruptive configuration changes, you can't do this. It takes so much work. We have to develop a whole learning mode around it. So to take this little bit of example, there's a very notable MSP vendor out there. Won't say them by name, but they do configure, say, the Windows firewall, right? They make sure it's on the inbound rules, XYZ, right? Those are CIS benchmarks. And when we onboarded this, again, very mature MSP, I think about 8,000 endpoints, his internal environment, he's like, hey, why does this one machine say it's off? Why don't you have your firewall on? And he's like, that's not right. Of course it's on. He went to that third-party solution, which is not a configuration management. It was just doing it as a side value add, just kind of something on top of their main core product. And that third-party solution said it was on. Like, yep. Did a fresh scan. Yep, all good. Like, okay, guys, here's the reg key, or here's where the setting is. Let's check the source of truth on the device itself. It was off. We were right. So why do other vendors not go down this path? Microsoft is really, 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 really hard to work with. And if you trust group policy and you trust Intune, you're no better than that. So the only way to do this correctly is to build an entire system at the registry level and check the sources of truth, which is so much work. Not to say they'll never do it, because I do see larger players trying to get to this space. But that's one of the fortunate things we have as our moat is this learning mode, because people just it's way more complicated than people realize.
This is not. This is everybody's problem, really.
If you have a computer, you should configure the asset. I mean,
this is no different than people are like, oh, Windows Defender is pretty good, and I was like, but can you, it's great until somebody shuts it off.
Yeah.
And then can
and
you
do you get
manage?
feedback when it turns off with traditional group policy? You don't even know if that attacker changes a config. You will never know unless you have a solution like ours that can tell you in real time and change it back. The functionality just didn't exist. So no shame to any MSP out there. This area just lacked innovation, and it still lacks innovation. We could probably use some more competitors to get the message out there, and that would benefit us. But right now, I mean, it's really just us as far as I know on the landscape.
Wow. All right. So you built this company to live in MSP land, yes?
Yes, 100% MSP. We do have VARs and distributors, so I do present to enterprise on that respect. But Senteon as a company, 100% that direction.
So how does the program work?
How does the program work? Can you define that question a little bit more?
Right? Like,
as a partner,
I sign up. Is there a minimum? Is it per endpoint? Is it per customer? Like, is there a term?
Yeah, so we're I've been told very flexible, which always makes me feel good. We're happy to do a bill on usage model. So our pricing does begin, it is scaling pricing, right? So pricing does begin at the premium of $2 per endpoint per month. Minimum on that is 50 endpoints, right? So you got to buy in at $100, right? But we have decided as a company that this is too hard to give every MSP special pricing, because turns out MSPs love to negotiate, and it became something that made me not want to go to work anymore. I was so sick of it. MSPs out there, I know you got to do your job. I respect your job, but we as a company, I got so tired of. I said, at 250 endpoints, you get it for $1. There's no more down than that. I mean, if you do have this massive endpoint size and you really need to push me, that's fine. But as a company, it was too hard to track. It was too hard to manage relationships. So at 250 endpoints, it's $1. What comes with that as well is our entire resource hub. So man, this is probably one of the most underappreciated things that I've worked on in the MSP space. But the VARs told me I have one of the best ones, which is so kind of them. But MSPs, I have an entire resource hub dedicated to sales material that you can download into Canva, toss your own branding. And I know your clients don't know what hardening is. So my favorite piece of this is I related hardening to about a dozen different topics like insider threats, phishing, right? And I created a 7-point story of how hardening mitigates the risk of that activity. So now I'm trying, and it hasn't been, I don't think, really utilized, but I'm trying to bridge that conversation to help MSPs elevate their client conversations. So that's something I'm really passionate about because, again, during market research, I kept hearing my clients don't care. They don't want to do this. I'm like, I don't know, man. I'm a business owner and I do care. And if they're anything like me, they should also care. They mustn't have the right pieces in front of them to care. And that's what I'm really trying to elevate MSPs to do is to bring the technical stuff to them to an extent.
No, hey, like I said, you can't make it simple enough for the guys at the bottom of the food chain. They'll never adopt, which sounds like you already, kind of went back and did. That being said, it's a pretty affordable price point. I mean, we've all spent way more money on way less effective things. I know I have.
Less than a quarter of a penny per setting, if you want to put it in that respect.
Well, just that being said, so is there a term or like how does this work? Is it like
annual agreements? Yeah.
Okay.
And we are very flexible to the point where once you hit that 250 minimum, we work with you on either a deployment methodology, or if you're just in this special situation, you just need bill on usage, we do that as well, right? We do try to push for us to either do the onboarding for you. For example, one of our engineers will literally go set up Senteon, do the learning mode, and give you a literal report of what he found and say, hey, here's what we found. Here's the decisions I think you should make. If you greenlight this report, I'll click the button for you. Like literally pay the $1 and you don't even have to sign into Senteon.
Wow.
So very much really aggressive, just trying to, yeah, I mean, we want as little barriers as possible. Just like Microsoft doesn't want barriers to disruption, we don't want barriers to adoption. So if there's anything we can remove to make this easier, I present to MSP clients all the time. If there's anything we can do to eliminate barriers, like that's what we're here for. We're here to really bring hardening top of mind and make it done. I mean, this was a funny story from MSP Geek. I was talking to a good friend now. I had just met him in just some networking groups with the Tech Degenerate organization. And I asked him, what's the first thing you do when a client comes to you and wants a new application? And he said, I reach out to that vendor or whatever software owner that is, and I learn about it, see if there's MFA, and I configure said asset. I go, okay, great. When you get a new client and you inherit their existing assets or OSs or browsers, why don't you do it then? It wasn't really a good answer.
Fair point. Fair point. I mean, again, time. It's always at the base of a lot of this. Didn't do, didn't think about, didn't know. Time. Yeah, for sure. So just in case for the people, especially who are listening in audio format, Senteon is spelled Senteon, so that way you didn't come up with some weird spelling. So now that we know the spelling, Zach, where do they go to learn more information? And then remind everybody about the offer for the assessment tool.
Yep. So Senteon.co, I believe it's /contact to fill out the form, but if you go to Senteon.co, you can easily find that. You can also actually sign up. We do have a freemium. I didn't mention this, but we do take all these settings, crosswalk them again to the regulated frameworks, whether it's PCI, HIPAA, NIST, whatever you want to look at, or MITRE. And that database of all these crosswalks with the pathway, what is this setting, XYZ, completely free forever. That's just one of our things, right? No remediation, no reporting, but you get this database of answers, right? So that's completely free. So you can go there and reach out. The other thing I want to note, if you do look up Senteon on our YouTube channel, we are partnered and sponsors with Center for Internet Security, CIS. And one of the challenges was MSPs didn't know what risk was being mitigated by changing a single setting. So I actually rewrote, I think so far about 600 settings. And I hold a weekly webinar series with CIS and a special guest, which George, maybe you should come on. And we talk about the setting, why it's important, and if applicable, how to talk to your client about it. So do that every single week. We've done almost 50 episodes. The next season starts June 19th on browser hardening. We'll go over all of the settings to harden a Chrome browser. And then that free, yeah. And then that free offering, again, I love coming on these shows. Thank you for having me. So I always want to leave a gift. These assessments that I talked about, the sales presentation, or just the simple Excel export of your configuration stats for your internal environment or external clients. Happy to do this completely free for you guys. Just toss in MSP Initiative or George is great into the comment section when you fill out that form, and I'd be happy to extend that offer to you guys. So very, very much look forward to it and hope you guys do reach out.
So this was really cool. We recorded this whole thing. Go back, rewind this. There's a lot of cool nuggets in here. But generally speaking, it's a gap. And we all have like, I don't know, 50 vendors that you bought stuff from, but like nobody seems to like actually solve this. Out comes a company, which by the way is why I love this space. Cause like you go out, you try and find the answer. And when the answer doesn't exist, it's like, let's build something. I think that's what's so cool about the sandbox that we live in. So you find this session shortly under mspinitiative.com under sessions or on our YouTube page or on our podcatcher, however you consume this, it is there. Look up Zach. We didn't even spell Zach's last name for people who are listening, but just Senteon, Zach, boom, you'll find him. I think there's only one guy there.
Very active on LinkedIn. And that webinar series I talked about is LinkedIn Live, free registration. You don't even have to, give me your email to see our content. It's no buy the money and then you get the full access. It's all free education. So
I think I said that exactly earlier.
That's why I said it.
Yes. Very happy to meet you finally, virtually at least. I'm sure I'll run into you out on the road somewhere between now and the end of the year. I'll drop a note to CJ, tell him, we connected, and Matt Lee for that matter. For everyone else, please keep tuning back into these. We do these twice a week. Again, these are totally for you, right? Like this wasn't some buy now infomercial. This was like, hey, let's educate you. And if this is something that you think you want to learn more about, then go research it. All right. I mean, that's the cool part about these. So Zach, thank you for your time. Everyone else, thanks for listening, and we'll catch you on the next one.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.